Well, hello there, and welcome to this webinar on the TAE LLN 411 Address Adult Language Literacy and Numeracy Unit from the TAE 40116. My name is Mark Miles, and it's my absolute pleasure and honour to welcome you to Success Training Academy's learning series that we've got here for you as part of your TAE. Yes, there are definitely some webinars that are going to help you through your assessments. However, this particular webinar is specifically focused on helping you develop the skills, the knowledge, and the ability to really apply the language literacy and numeracy fundamentals to your training, to your assessment, and to your overall delivery as a trainer. So in this webinar, we're going to cover fundamental things such as how you can navigate the Australian Core Skills Framework. We're going to cover things like how you can adjust your training delivery to get better results with your LLN challenged learners. And we're certainly going to cover how you can modify your assessments as well, so that anyone sitting through your assessments will be able to have equal and, I guess, best possible chance of getting through your assessments if they have any LLN challenges at all. All right, so let's get into today's content. And first thing I recommend is definitely, as you're watching this webinar, have a notepad available, be taking lots of notes, because we're going to cover some critical information that's going to really help you out understand the language literacy and numeracy field. Be prepared to do the activities as we go through them. There'll be a number of activities that we do throughout the webinar, and I definitely recommend that when we come to an activity, you pause the webinar, do the activity, and then unpause it, resume, and we will come back as a group and talk about things. Have a do not disturb sign on your desk. This is a really important one, because if you want to get the most from this webinar, definitely you want to have your own space. You don't want to be interrupted, and you really want to dedicate your time to this webinar and to getting the most out of it. All right. So section 1, LLN and the ACSF fundamentals. All right. Now this is all about understanding what LLN is, the context of it, and essentially your fundamental role as a trainer and how you're going to implement LLN within the RTO and within the workplace that you work in. All right. So LLN, is it really a big problem? Now, back in 2011, they actually did a report, and the report was called No More Excuses. And this report really shaped the landscape for LLN, and it really showed us ultimately how bad the levels of LLN were in Australia. So in the report, No More Excuses, and you can certainly look it up, read through it, and it's a very insightful read. If you go to Google and type in No More Excuses, it's going to be the first result that comes up. Now, as you read through the report, you're going to come across some pretty scary statistics. Now, the key statistics that I want to highlight to you are the following: 53, 46, and 13. 53, 46, and 13. Now, 53% relates to numeracy, 46% relates to reading, and 13% relates to illiteracy. Now, essentially in the report, they found back in 2011 that 53% of people in Australia have challenges with numeracy, i.e. they cannot perform numeracy skills to the levels required within the workplace. 46% of people in Australia have challenges with reading, and challenges to the extent that they struggle in that area within their job or work role. 13% have challenges with writing, and when we look at these numbers, it really shows us the enormity of the problem that existed in 2011, and people say that results have only got worse ever since then. Now, there's a number of reasons for those numbers and how bad those numbers are. Certainly, the quality of maybe reading and writing in remote areas is certainly an issue. Certainly, we have a number of overseas migrants that come to Australia to work that may not have the levels of reading and writing and numeracy that we may expect. And also, Just due to the rise of technology, we find that people's ability to spell and do basic word processing and reading and writing and all of that, technology is sort of overcompensated for basic reading and writing skills as well. Okay, so the fact is, though, that the quality of reading and writing in numeracy and oral communication is getting worse and worse and worse. And as a trainer and assessor, we need to be aware of that so that we don't make the mistake of assuming that people will automatically be able to get through our courses without support. And also, we need to remember that potentially our students may not be able to read, write, do numbers, and orally communicate as well as we can. Okay, and that's a critical thing to remember. We can't assume the levels of our students, and also we can't make the assumption that just because they're in the course that they're able to perform the required skills and knowledge and demonstrate that to us as a trainer. All right, so we need to be aware of it and we need to embrace it. All right, so as part of being a trainer, you are expected to be able to do the following. Okay, and before I go into this, I want to make a strong statement to say that as a trainer, at no time will you be required to actually teach someone to read and write, okay, or even to do maths as such. Your role basically comes and covers these things and these things only. As a TAE qualified trainer, you are going to need to be able to do the following. Identify the course requirements. So you're going to need to be able to look at your course, whether it's a certificate 1, 2, 3, 4, diploma, and maybe advanced diploma and above. You're going to need to be able to look at the course and identify what are the LLN requirements for that course. What are the levels that would be required to complete that course? Next, number 2, you're going to need to be able to identify the student's level of LLN. Okay, so there's a numbering system that we use, and I'm going to explain that in the webinar. However, you need to be able to look at the course and what levels of LLN will be required. Then look at the student's level and then identify the gaps. Identify the gaps between what the student has and what the course may require. Okay, once you've done that, you then need to identify the levels of support and provide support if possible. Okay, now I say if possible because ultimately as a trainer and assessor, there's only so much support that you can actually provide, and also within your RTO context, there's only so much support that we can provide. If the levels of support required are beyond what you can actually provide, then you would need to send them away to a specialist. And they could still enroll, but they would need to certainly go away to that specialist and receive extra support. However, if you deem the fact that students may not actually have the levels required and it would take quite a period of time for them to develop those levels, you may suggest to them that they look at enrolling maybe in 6 months' time or 12 months' time when they do have the levels required. Okay, so it is a judgment that you will need to be able to make as a trainer or assessor, and through this webinar, you're certainly going to be able to pick up the knowledge to be able to do that. All right, so challenges and consequences of LLN deficiencies in the workplace. All right, now whenever you see this little indicator here, this sign, it means that we're about to do an activity. Now, I want you to think about your workplace. I want you to think about ultimately what are the things that you need to read, write, calculate, research on a daily basis. And I'd like you to think about what would be the challenges or consequences if somebody couldn't read and write and use numbers effectively within your job role. Okay, so I'd like you to think about, so maybe you are a safety officer. I'd like you to think about what would be the potential consequences if you couldn't read the documents that you needed to read, or that you couldn't write the reports that you need to write. I'd like you to imagine that you're a nurse. What would be the challenges or consequences if you couldn't read or write to the level required for your job role? Okay, so I'd like you to think about what is your job, And I'd like you to take a moment to write down 2 or 3 things that may happen if you were not reading and writing to the standard required for your job role. All right, so I'll give you a couple of moments to do that. So at this moment, pause the webinar and just write down a couple of consequences that could happen if you couldn't read and write to the level required for your job role. All right, so I'll give you a moment to do that. And I suggest you push pause right now, okay? Alrighty, so I'm going to assume that you did that activity. Now, let's take a look at some of the consequences that could eventuate. Well, maybe if people couldn't read, then they wouldn't be able to read signs properly. Maybe if they couldn't write, they wouldn't be able to fill out forms properly. Maybe there would be miscommunication in the workplace, all right? And maybe emails would be read wrongly, maybe oral communication, there would be miscommunication in the messages that are given between maybe a secretary and a boss, maybe appointments would be missed, things like that. Maybe customers would be lost, all right? Maybe orders would be placed or received incorrectly. Maybe there'd be miscalculations in amounts. Maybe payroll would go wrong. Technology doesn't work, okay? Patients get given the wrong medication. That would certainly be a big issue. Instructions are not followed, okay? Any types of instructions, if they're not followed properly, definitely a big issue, all right? So we really need to appreciate that language literacy and numeracy has a huge impact on all communication and all performance, okay? And I got really excited with the language literacy and numeracy unit being added to the TAE because it really reinforced the importance of getting our communication as trainers correct, efficient, and succinct, and we are communicating in a way that is as comprehensible as possible. Because if you're training 20 students, you want to be aiming for as many of those students as possible to be understanding your communication in the best way possible and as clear as possible and in the way that you intended. Let's say that you give instructions to 20 students, but you give it in a way that only 15 people understand it. Well, that's probably not going to be as efficient as possible. And we need to be willing to self-reflect and understand where could we modify and polish our communication so that everybody is understanding it as successfully as possible. So, what are LLN skills? Well, ultimately, it is broken down into language, literacy, and numeracy. All right. So, language is certainly the spoken word, the heard word, what we hear from other people, all right? And we've got certainly non-verbal, verbal communication there as well. Literacy is the writing and the reading side of things, and numeracy is the numbers and the calculations that we may do. All right, certainly within the workplace and in the training room where we are getting people ready for the workplace. Okay, so LLN skills in the workplace, we really need to be aware of ultimately what's required. What do we need to be able to communicate on a daily basis is going to really show us as a trainer, show us as a person, what is required within the workplace. And sometimes we just turn up at work and we just do what we do. But when we actually unpack it from an LLM perspective, it becomes quite interesting. And we also are able to use this information to ultimately define roles, create performance reviews, and all these different things. And when we look at job performance in terms of LLN, we may be able to identify and spot deficiencies that maybe we couldn't previously. Right? So let's get into how it applies in the workplace. So let's ask ourselves some questions. Within your job, what does someone need to organize, plan, think about? Okay, on a daily basis, what do they need to plan? What do they need to organize? And write that down. What documents do they need to read? All right, get very specific on those documents. Don't just say emails. Well, what types of emails? What do they need to write? Okay, what kinds of emails do they need to write? What kinds of reports do they need to write? 4, what messages do they need to take in? And when I say what messages, I mean what kind of things would other people be saying to them that they need to understand? what information they need to share with others verbally, okay? What calculations they need to perform. All right, when you get very specific on those calculations, things really come to light. Maybe it's filling out a timesheet, or maybe it is coding a computer program. Okay, it could be a complete range of different things. Okay, so I do want to encourage you to hit the pause button right now and really answer those questions there. All right, because when you do, things will get very clear for you. Okay, now in terms of an RTO, what are its obligations? Well, under the standards, the standards for RTO Operations 2015, Standard 1.7 says that the RTO determines the support needs of individual learners and provides access to the educational and support services necessary for the individual learner to meet the requirements of the training product as specified in training packages or VET accredited courses. Okay, so what that essentially means is that as an organization, you have a fundamental obligation to identify the support needs and then provide that support. Okay, it's no ifs or buts. You need to do that. Okay. Now, the Australian Core Skills Framework is a framework that essentially was put out in order for training organizations and also trainers and assessors to be able to do the following. Benchmark LLN course requirements, as we talked about, benchmark student levels, and ultimately devise strategies for supporting students. Now, the Australian Core Skills Framework was put out around a similar time of 2011 when that report of No More Excuses came out. And ultimately, it is a book of levels, all right? It's in a way to classify a student into different levels and identify certainly the course requirements based on what we could expect a student to be able to do at those levels. All right, and in a moment we're going to go through the Australian Core Skills Framework and I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's actually quite an easy and fun book to navigate, and the more you get to know it, the easier LLN, I guess, structure and landscape becomes to you. Okay, now what is the ACSF? Well, fundamentally, it's broken down into 5 core skills. 5 core skills. So we've got learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy. All right. So we've got learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy. So when we look at LLN based on these 5 core skills, what we can then do is break down these 5 core skills into levels. So learning would have level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Reading would be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Writing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Oral 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Numeracy 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And as I said, it's a book of levels. So when we go through it, you'll see that there are different chapters. Okay, so in each of the chapters is the core skills. So this will be chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5. So let's take a look at the book in a little bit more detail, okay? Alrighty, so hopefully you can see on my screen now, we have a LLN Core Skills ACSF chart. Okay, now this chart is very, very handy, and if you ask the office at Success Training Academy, they'll be able to provide the chart to you. However, I love this chart because it's a great summation of the of the ACSF in general. All right, let me just move that for a second. All right, so that'll be able to, that'll show us what we need to see. Now, we've got the core skills across the top there. We've got learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy. And as you can see, each of the 5 core skills has 5 levels to it. So we've got level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And level 1 is extremely simplistic, and A level 5 is extremely complex. Now, I need to remind you or highlight to you that even a native speaker is not going to be a level 5 for all of the core skills, okay? And generally, a person is going to have varied results across the 5 core skills. Now, one of the best things that we can ever do to get really familiar with the different levels is to certainly read through the descriptions, all right? But one thing that I encourage you to do is to certainly plot yourself, because by plotting yourself, you're going to understand in a real life context, how does this actually all work? All right. So what I want to do for you now is do an example of that for you. So for myself personally, looking at numeracy, I'm going to work backwards. Numeracy, I'm going to say that I would probably be at around a 2 for numeracy. All right. Now, if you look at the criteria here, we've got simple percentages, simple fractions, north, east, southwest map, keep record of hours worked. All right. All these different things. I'd probably say I'm a level 2 for numeracy, just because I haven't done numbers for a long time. It's not my greatest skill, all right, but I would definitely say I'm around a 2, maybe a 3 for numeracy, all right. Oral communication. A reminder, level 1 is very basic skills, all right. So they can barely say their name is the best way to think about it, all right. Now, as you scroll down, you can see that level 5, they negotiate complex problematic exchanges, they draw a repertoire to subtly influence, they use A's to deliver sustained presentations, lead focus groups, all right? Now, reading through this, I'm probably going to say that I would be around a 4 for oral communication. Okay, I wouldn't say a 5 because I'm not necessarily that much of a great negotiator. All right, so hopefully you're starting to see how I'm putting context to these things. All right, now writing. So reading through the writing, and hopefully you're doing this yourself as I'm going through this as well. Now, scrolling down. Yeah, I'd probably put myself at a level 5 for writing because I feel pretty confident I could do most of these things. Okay, now reading, scrolling down. All right, so I'm probably going to put myself at a level 4 for reading. Okay, now learning. Learning is your ability to manage your time and resources to get a learning outcome. Okay, so it's about managing your time and about the materials that you have available to you. But ultimately, people that take full self-responsibility for things would be around a level 5. People that may blame others, blame the materials, blame the system, blame other people around them, and don't really show much self-initiative are probably going to be around a learning level 1 or 2. Okay, now, people that are learning level 3 probably follow the steps, do the steps, but don't think outside the box, okay? Now, you can probably start to relate learning levels to managerial levels as well, because the more somebody can predict things, the more they can foresee problems, the more they can put systems in place, the higher they would probably go up, okay? So, I would probably put myself at around a level 5 for learning, because ultimately, I'm very good at predicting what might happen, putting systems in place, okay? So, what I now encourage you to do, if you haven't already, is start to plot yourself. Plot, what would you give yourself for numeracy? All right, so I'll slowly scroll down for numeracy there, okay? And oral communication, all right? What would you give yourself for oral communication? Okay. Writing, what would you give yourself for writing? And reading, what would you give yourself for reading? Okay, and learning, what would you give yourself? Okay, the fact that you're doing your TA, I would highly suggest that you would be a minimum of 3, 4, or 5 for the learning skills. Okay, typically the ones that turn up late to class are the ones that are going to be much lower on the learning levels because they just can't manage their time and resources. Okay, let's just be honest about that. But the more you find that students are turning up to class on time, asking great questions, showing self-initiative, those ones are definitely going to be the higher levels of learning. So this whole chart is a really powerful way to start to understand your students and the students' levels, their performance, and what they're really capable of. All right, so hopefully this chart has really started to unpack the ACSF for you and show you how we can really use it. All right, now what I want you to think about is having that chart, knowing learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and levels 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I'd like you to think about the following jobs or the following occupations. I'd like you to think about an accountant, tax accountant, a taxi driver, a librarian, a police officer, a project manager, and your own job. And what I'd like you to do is write down what would be the core skills required levels for each of these jobs. So an accountant, let me do an accountant for you, okay? And then you can do the rest. Now, an accountant, learning, I'd probably give them a level 4. That would be the bare minimum requirement for certainly performing their job. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say a 5, I'm going to say 4. Okay. Now, learning, reading, I'm going to say around a 4 for reading, all right, because I want them to be able to read legislation and certainly read for prolonged periods of time, okay? Now, learning, reading, writing, okay, writing, I'm probably going to say around a 4 or a 5 for writing. Now, oral communication, I would ideally love them to have around a 4 for oral communication. So we got learning, reading, writing, oral communication. Last of all, we got numeracy. Now, although we may think that numeracy would need to be very high, when you look at level 5 numeracy, it's actually not that, like level 5 is highly complex. There's a lot of, algebraic equations and different things that need to be done at a very complex level. Now, I would suggest that an accountant is going to have a lot of software that's going to do all of the work for them. So I'm going to put maybe around a 3 or a 4 for numeracy for an accountant. Okay, that might surprise you. However, when you look back at the criteria, you'll probably agree with me. Okay, so what I suggest you do is for the remainder of these, tax accountant, taxi driver, blah, I want to suggest that you pause the recording in a moment and go back to the chart and use that and unpack each of these job roles. So for a tax accountant, learning, what score would be required? Reading, what score would be required? Writing, oral communication, and numeracy, what would be the bare minimum requirements that they would need in order to get through that job or survive in the job or perform the job effectively? Okay, so now, how to download the ACSF. What I suggest that you do is you go to Google and you literally type in download ACSF, all right? And you're going to find the search results, and let me show you what that looks like. All right, so you literally type in ACSF download or download ACSF. And then you want to come to this one here, and you want to click on that. And when you do so, you're going to actually have a copy that comes up like this. All right. Now it's 203 pages, and let me show you around the ACSF a little bit. Okay. Alrighty, so let me show you around the ACSF a little bit. So if you scroll down, we have the different page numbers, obviously with the different chapters that we've got going on here. And if you scroll down, the first chapter is going to be, scrolling down, first chapter is going to be learning. Okay, so as I said, each of the chapters is correlating to the core skills. So we got learning, and that is broken down into levels 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And it's also broken down into indicators. Okay, so level 1 is made up of these indicators. These indicators relate to 2, these indicators, these indicators, these indicators. Okay. Now, for example, for a student to be a level 2, they must successfully get 2.02, 2.01. All right, and of course, all of level 1. Okay. For a student to be a level 4, they need to get all of these numbers in these indicators. Now, that would be ascertained through an LLN validated test or an LLN test that they would complete in your RTO. Okay, so if we scroll down, we have the explanation for what this level indicator would be, 1.01, and that would describe their abilities. Okay, now coming down, 1.02, that describes that level. Okay. Now, one of the really cool things about the ACSF is it talks about things called domains of communication. And it's broken down into 3 areas: personal and community, workplace and employment, education and training. And this basically tells us at a level 1 learning, what can we expect a learner to be able to do? Okay. And it actually lists out the different things that we could expect. Okay, so it's really cool. I really love this part. All right, now if you come down further, it's going to tell us about level 2, 2.01 there, 2.02, and then again it's going to tell us the sample activities, domains of communication for a level 2 learning person. All right, now as I said, it goes down to levels 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for this core skill, and then, lo and behold, after learning, we've got the next chapter, which is reading. Okay, and then that shows us a table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it gives us the indicators for reading. Okay, and then again, it gives us domains of communication and what we would expect a student to be able to read for reading level 1, okay, in these different areas. Really insightful when you read through things. Also, it gives us great ideas if we wanted to support students in these particular levels. We could come here and we could actually use some of these ideas as support activities in our training room. Okay, so scrolling down, as you can imagine, so I'm just going to scroll down to, let's say, level 5, okay, and so we got 5.03 there, 5.04, and we got, again, domains of communication, but I just want to highlight that the complexity obviously goes up quite a bit when we get to level 5. Prepares a review for a book club meeting, critically evaluates and responds to documents, compares and contrasts competing offers, reads aloud with confidence, workplace and employment. We got identifies and extracts relevant information from complex diagrams, reviews relevant national, state, and local legislation and regulations relevant to the job role. Okay, so you can really see that it amps up in terms of complexity. Okay, so next chapter is writing, and the rest I'm going to allow you to read through your own time. However, ACSF, if you type in ACSF download, you're going to find this one and you want to click on that one. Certainly the other ones do work, but I've just found that this one's the easiest to navigate. All right, and you can certainly print it off if you want. All right, it is 203 pages though. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we would actually apply the ACSF, what we would do with it. So stage 1, we need to identify the required LLN skills of the training program. So what that means is we need to be able to look at our course, a Cert 1, Cert 2, Cert 3, Cert 4 diploma, whatever it might be, and we need to be able to unpack a unit of competency to identify the LLN skills that are within that unit. And we need to remember that just because it's a Cert 3, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a Cert, an ACSF level 3 for the different core skills. There is zero correlation between the AQF and the ACSF. Now, we need to be able to look at a unit itself and unpack the actual LLN requirements. And another word for unpack is just to identify. We need to consider how those skills will need to be applied in the workplace. All right. We need to consult with other workers and supervisors as well to get their perspective. Okay. So let's start on that process. So we need to look at a unit and we need to identify things called trigger words. Okay. So So what I want to show you now is essentially a chart that has suggested trigger words that we can use to help us unpack a unit of competency, identify the required LLN skills. Or the different levels that may be required within that unit. And I'll show you how we do that in a second. But first of all, I want to introduce the concept of trigger words to you. So a trigger word is ultimately any verb or any action with a noun that's going to highlight to us what are the tasks or actions that would be required from the unit. And if we look at trigger words, essentially it's the major verbs in the unit itself. All right. So if we looked at, for example, the word of, I love to start with numeracy. It's the most easy to relate to. If we start with numeracy and we looked at the word calculate, I hope that you can understand how correlate would definitely fall into the category of numeracy. All right. Now, some of these words are going to fall into multiple categories. Okay. For example, assist. Well, that could actually fall into multiple categories of not just oral communication. Okay. But reading, the check is definitely a reading word. Let's see, one of my other favorite ones here is encourage. Again, that could be oral communication, but it could also be in written form as well. All right, clarify, that could be in written form, but oral communication as well. Check is definitely a reading word. All right, analyze, definitely a reading task. All right, and then we've got all these suggested words that would help us understand what category trigger words would fall into. But now it's going to make a lot more sense when we actually look at a unit of competency. So as you would know, in order to get a unit of competency, we need to come to this website, training.gov.au. All right, we click on here, and I want to firstly look at the unit BSB ADM 405 Organized Meetings. Why this unit? Well, essentially, for me, it's just the simplest and easiest to follow. It's quite relatable, and generally in the workplace, everybody attends and organizes meetings in some capacity. Okay. Now, identifying trigger words. All right, let's do it together, and let's take a look at the unit. And the whole purpose of this process is to start to identify what level of LLN would be required. Okay. So if we're going to teach the unit organized meetings, what level of LLN would we need a student to be for them to survive and understand the unit? Now, the first step we want to do is identify those trigger words, as I said. So let's take a look at some examples. 1.1, okay, identify the type of meeting being organized and its purpose. So what is the key verb that we've got here? Well, the verb that we've got there is identify. Now, if we think back to the core skills, we've got learning, reading, writing, oral communication, numeracy. I would suggest that the word identify probably falls into the category of learning. Okay, so we want to highlight the trigger words for this unit. So we want to highlight, identify type of meeting, and that's going to be our first lot of trigger words. Okay. And then what I would do is just above that, I would put a small L to show that it's a learning trigger word. Okay, identify type of meeting. I want to highlight not just identify, but also identify type of meeting, because that's going to really give us even clearer distinction as to what level it might be. Okay, identify and comply with legal requirements. Okay, so I would highlight, identify, comply with legal requirements. Okay. Next one, I'm going to highlight, identify requirements of the meeting. Okay. And I'm going to again put a small L above that. Make meeting arrangements. That one again could be an L for learning, but it also could be oral communication numeracy as well. Okay. Now, advise participants of meeting details. All right, so I'm going to highlight all of that, and I'm probably going to put a small W above that, because I'm going to imagine that most meetings are announced via email or via some other communication system. Now, yes, it certainly could be done orally as well. Okay. Now, 2.1, prepare notice of meeting agenda, meeting papers in accordance with meeting requirements. All right. So now this is where I ask you, prepare notice of meeting. What core skill do you think that would relate to? Prepare notice of meeting. Would it be learning, reading, writing, oral communication, or numeracy? What do you think it might be? If you have said that it would be a writing task, well, you're absolutely correct. Okay, so you would highlight that and put a small W above that. Okay, check documentation. I wonder if you can pick up what that might be. Learning, reading, writing, oral communication. What do you think? If you're thinking it's a reading, then you're probably correct. Okay, so what you would do in order to identify the levels required for the unit is you would go through and highlight these key trigger words that are going to indicate to you the complexity of the task. Okay, so you're certainly going to do the performance evidence as well. All right, so you're going to highlight those trigger words. The knowledge evidence, you're going to highlight those ones as well. Okay, then overall what you're going to do is, what I suggest is, on a Word document you're going to group the words together. So you would group the learning words together, the writing words together, learning words, the reading words, the writing words, the oral communication words, and the numeracy words together. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go back to what I suggest is this chart. And that's going to give you some, I guess, basis for some ideas that you can then test. So for example, you look at those words that you identified in the unit organized meetings and you group all the numeracy words together and you go, probably for numeracy, it would be around a 1 or a 2. All right, maybe for learning, looking at the trigger words, it's going to be a level 2 or a 3. All right, then what you want to do is come over to the ACSF. And maybe you said that learning, you popped it at a level 2. And so what you would do, if I can scroll up quick enough, is you want to, if you want to come to the description of a learning level 2 and you want to see if there's actually some things that would correlate and back up your decision as well. All right, so there is absolutely no right or wrong in your decisions about what level it might be, but you need to be able to justify it. Okay, so coming back here, what you also want to think about is within your workplace, is in organize a meeting, you need to then also ask the critical questions such as, in order to organize a meeting, what would somebody need to plan? What would they need to think about? And you write down those answers. What would they need to be able to read in the context of your workplace and meetings in your workplace, okay? Or the workplace that you're training people to go into. Now, what would they need to be able to write in the context of a meeting? What would they need to be able to orally communicate, i.e. listen to, communicate a message to other people, all right? What numbers would they need to be able to deal with? And it's critically important that you go to the next step, which is actually asking yourself those questions. What would they need to think about? Read, write, communicate, and do numbers, because the trigger words is only going to give us so much information that we can glean from the unit. We need to contextualize the unit to the work place and also certainly to, I guess, the levels required for the AQF as well, because you may actually find the organized meetings unit may be taught in a Cert 3, Cert 4, even diploma level qualification. So again, you would need to raise the bar or lower the bar depending on the AQF level that you are teaching as well. Okay. Alrighty, so hopefully that process has made sense to you. So just here's a slide with those questions on there for you. So how wide does the learner need learning strategies or initiatives? How wide does the learner need to listen to and understand? So what do they need to listen to? What do they need to read? What do they need to write? what things they need to orally communicate and listen to, why does the learner need to do calculations, and what calculations do they need to do, okay? Critically important, we need to ask ourselves these questions. Okay, so the next thing we can do is map the requirements. So what we can do is we can have a graph like this, and we can actually shade it in. So for example, for learning, if we said that the unit required a level 3 for learning, we could shade these boxes in. Reading, if we said it required a level 4, we could shade those boxes in. Writing, maybe we said it was a level 2, so we'd shade those boxes in. Oral communication, maybe we said it was a 4, so you would shade those boxes in. Numeracy, maybe we said it was a 5, so you would shade all those boxes in. The really exciting thing is that we can then correlate that to the student's level. And we can show diagrammatically the difference between a learner's result and also what the requirement is for the actual course or the unit. So stage 4, identify the LLN skills levels of the learner themselves. So up till now, we have identified the course requirements. Now we need to identify the student's level. So we need to find a valid LLN assessment tool, okay, and I'll show you where you can certainly find those assessment tools. You need to conduct the assessment tool. You need to map the findings, or i.e. Mark their test, okay. Now, what you can do is you can then plot what the student got. So the learning, this student got a 3, reading they got a 3, writing they got a 3, numeracy they got a 2, oral communication they got a 3. Okay, so this dotted line here shows what the student got in their results. Now, here is what we call a spiky profile. Okay, so the bars here are the unit and what that requires, and the dotted line is the student themselves. So learning, we can pretty much see that the student has a level 3, the unit requires a 3, so they're bang on, they're fine, there's no gap there at all. Reading, the student has a 3, but the unit itself actually requires a 4. So we can see there's a bit of a gap there, all right? So we would need to support them in the reading area. Writing, we've got a 2 and a level 4 for the unit, so there's definitely a bit of a gap there again. Oral, there's a bit of a gap there, and numeracy, there's no problems at all. The student is meeting the requirements. All right, so this is essentially what we call a spiky profile. All right, and something you'll hear quite often, and certainly part of your assessment. All right, you need to be able to unpack and analyze a basic spiky profile. Okay, now LLN support strategies. So let's get into how we would actually support a student that had LLN deficiencies or had challenges in any of these core areas. Okay. So academic support is a really important thing to be able to provide. Challenge is, though, that often with LLN, you will not actually know that you have an LLN challenged learner until it is too late, okay? And one of the challenges is that students will often be hesitant to identify themselves as LLN challenged. Also, sometimes the trainers just do not receive any sufficient prior notice that they have LLN challenged learners in their group. And so sometimes you need to be able to very subtly identify the challenges and be able to deal with them on the spot. And we're going to certainly talk about some strategies to be able to do that. Okay. And one of the key things to remember is that with LLN, the more subtle that you can deal with it, the better, because you want to avoid singling people out. Okay, so icebreaker, travel to a non-English speaking country. So again, we've got this little bit of a sign here. And this is an activity that encourages you to start to get to think about communication from a different perspective. I'd like you to imagine that you are traveling to a non-English speaking country like Paris or like Italy or Germany, or even an Asian country such as China. I'd like you to think about if you were in that country and you were speaking to someone that didn't speak English, or even if you were in Australia and you were speaking to someone that didn't speak English as well as you did. I'd like you to think about what are some strategies a minimum of 3 strategies that you would use in order to communicate with somebody that didn't speak English as well as you did. Okay, so I want you to pause now and pause the webinar and write down a minimum of 3 strategies that you might use. Okay, so pause now and have a go. All right, so hopefully in that activity, in that time, you wrote down things such as using pictures, using diagrams, using Google Translate, using, let's say, pointing, gestures, using basic phrases from their language, really simplifying your words that you choose as well. Okay, and using good pauses in between your thoughts, whatever it might be. But now I want to ask you a new question, and the new question is, what are 6 things that you should never do if you are speaking to someone that didn't speak English as well as you did? Because it's really important that we understand how we can unconsciously make communication not as successful and potentially create emotional reactions from people and maybe even hinder our communication. So we've got top 6 things that you should never do. And I'd like you to pause the webinar again, just like before. I'd like you to write down 6 things that you should never, ever, ever do if you're communicating with someone that didn't speak English as well as you do. Okay, so let's take a look. Just pause, write those down, and then we'll take a look. Alrighty, so hopefully you've written down your own list, but here are 6 that I have come up with. So certainly, the first one is you never want to make them feel stupid, and that can be done by certainly your own facial gestures. It can be done in how you speak to them, tonality-wise, maybe you speak at an overly slow pace, at a pace that's a little bit beyond realistic. Maybe you single them out. Okay, if you're teaching in a group, you definitely want to single out LLN challenge learners. Maybe you speak down to them. That's not a good idea as well. Maybe you overly gesticulate. Not a good idea. Maybe you speak too quickly. Again, what's the point? Okay, get frustrated and be impatient. Never a good idea, and nobody appreciates the emotional reactions around that. Okay, so now let's take a look though at the 2 biggest mistakes of trainers that you may see in a training room, and I'm sure that everybody watching this webinar now doesn't fall into the trap of doing these things. However, we need to appreciate that with LLN and providing support, doing these 2 things, it's a waste of time, absolute waste of time. Okay, so the first one that we always want to avoid as a trainer is that of speaking louder. All right, there's absolutely no point in raising your voice, because ultimately, if somebody hasn't understood what you've said, it's not because of the volume, it's because how it's being said. Okay, so the second mistake that sometimes trainers make is that they say the same thing the same way twice. They say the same thing the same way twice. Now, what I mean by that is if a student's put up their hand and asked a question and the trainer has explained it and the student still doesn't understand it, well, really it's a sign that the message and how it's been presented is the issue itself. Okay, so we need to become extremely flexible with how we actually choose our words and present our information. And the better we can get at presenting information in multiple mediums and multiple word choice, the higher the probability that students are going to understand the intention and the final message that you've got to present to them. Okay, so the ultimate taboo is obviously to blame the learner. We never, ever, ever want to blame the learner, because that's a waste of time. And as soon as we blame the learner, then really it's game over and no more communication eventuates in a positive way. Okay, so we always want to be thinking, how else can I communicate? How else could I present this information? How else could I get a better outcome? How else could I present this in the way that more and more people understand it? Okay, so always catch yourself if you are ever blaming the listener or blaming the learner. Okay, So as I said, the ultimate aim when dealing with an LLN challenged learner, the ultimate skill and attribute to be aiming for is flexibility. Flexibility in how you deliver your message. Okay, so simple word choice can make all the difference. Simple word choice, all right? And the more you get flexible, the more you can deliver your message in simplified forms, the higher the probability that more people are going to understand you, okay? So first thing we want to do is be able to vary our syntactic delivery. So what I mean by that is we want to be able to go laterally across the line and prevent misunderstandings by being able to present different words for the same concept. So we've got laundry here, we've got washing, wash the clothes, we've got table, bench, counter. All of these words pretty much mean the same thing, pretty much, okay? Laundry, washing, wash the clothes, pretty much the same thing. Okay. But we need to understand that maybe an LLN challenge learner comes from a background where maybe they've only ever understood the word of laundry or washing the dishes. So we need to be able to present a concept using multiple different words. And the more we can do that, the higher the probability that a student is going to have a memory or a word that they do actually understand, and the message will get across. All right. Now, we can also have a complexity scale. So the more abstract or the more specific or the more complex or the more simplified way to think about it. All right. So here's an example. Personnel is obviously more complex than staff, and staff is obviously more complex than people. Okay, so you need to be able to go up and down in levels of complexity and also sideways as well. All right, so let's practice simplifying things. Let's practice simplifying everything that we ever present to our students. So terminology such as evacuate a building could be quite hard for an LLN challenged learner. Maybe they don't know the word evacuate. Okay, maybe it's quite hard for them. So we could break that down into leave the building. Okay, might seem quite simple, but the better you get at simplifying, the better you will be as a trainer in communicating. Designated assembly point. Okay, again, quite a technical word here, designated. You could just say meeting place. Okay, vehicle. All right, so we could say automobile. Another word for that could be, I wonder what you can think. Hopefully you're thinking a word that starts with C. Okay, yep, car. All right, so I really want to encourage you to get very good at these two fundamental skills: syntactic variation and complexity scale, and being able to simplify everything you ever say to students or present in a written form, because the better you can simplify, the higher the probability that everyone's going to understand it. Okay, there is no gold medals for making things complex, only misunderstandings. Okay, so now I just want to remind you of your role as a trainer assessor. Just to remind you that your job is not to teach someone to read, write, and do numbers. Your job is to do the following: identify the course level, identify the student level, support them if possible, but if not, then send them away. Okay? Now, send them away to a specialist. But let's take a look. Who qualifies to be a specialist? An LLN specialist or practitioner is a person who has acquired formal qualifications and practical experience in LLN. There are many different qualifications available, including in the fields of developmental learning, language literacy and numeracy skills, learning language literacy and numeracy skill acquisition, second language acquisition. Okay. Now, if you actually go to training.gov.au and type in TAE, you will see a number of qualifications that are available if you want to source an LLN specialist, or if you want to become an LLN specialist yourself. Now, as a trainer assessor, you may have the opportunity to work with an LLN specialist, and that could take varying forms, okay? But let's take a look at the role of an LLN specialist and what they would actually do. So the role of a specialist is that they're going to provide advice and guidance when you are interpreting, explaining, and making recommendations for the appropriate support strategies for results for students. So maybe you test a student, you get their results, What you then could do is send those results off to an LLN specialist and say, what are the key issues here? How could we support our learners? How bad is the situation? All right, and you can get a specialist opinion. All right. Now, some students may need support that is beyond what is deliverable within the training context, and you need to be able to identify that. Okay. So, who needs an LLN specialist? Well, there's two different types of learners who may require LLN specialist support. Number one, new entrants into the workplace, and existing workers themselves. Okay, so maybe you've got some workers that are in a factory or even in an office environment, and they may be going into different roles, or they're currently being retrained, or maybe they're doing a qualification as part of personal development, professional development. But let's come back to new entrants for a second. New entrants are those people who require LLN specialist support to assist them to enter or re-enter the workforce. This group can include new apprentices and trainees, workers who have been made redundant, and the long-term unemployed. Okay, so access to specialists. All right, now this is a little bit of a controversial area, and sometimes specialists are not as available as we would love. All right, so in a large organization, you will often find specialists on hand. So a large organization like TAFE or a very large RTO is going to have LLN specialists on hand, which is great because you can easily conduct your LLN tests and then create your support program and then send them off to the specialist to really get their assistance on that. Teaching with a specialist can also happen. So you may get a subject matter expert that team teaches with an LLN specialist at the same time or in conjunction with. Okay. Now, a smaller organization may not have a specialist on hand, and they may need to look externally for that support. So they may hire a consultant. They may use foundation skills units. We'll talk about those soon. They may provide one-on-one tutoring. They may share strategies within the training department. Okay, so this could be trainers getting together and sharing with each other what has worked. Okay, and sharing ideas across the team. Now, there are certainly some websites that you can guide your students towards, and some of the websites may include your SSO, so Service Skills Organization, the ones that write the training package for your industry. All right, then we've got industry literacy net. All right, then we've got a website called Taking the Lead, and that's going to have some ideas for you as well. Okay, now we've also got things called foundation skills units. All right. Now, foundation skills units, let me just, okay. So if you want to find foundation skills units, all you need to do is in the search bar, type in FSK and, excuse me, foundation skills units are basically units that were put together in order to support LLN challenged learners. Now, if you come to training.gov.au and type in FSK, as I said, you'll find that. Okay. Now, in terms of qualifications, there's three qualifications as part of the FSK training package. All right. So you've got Cert 1 access to vocational pathways, Cert 1 skills for vocational pathways, Cert 2 in skills for work and vocational pathways. Now, as part of those qualifications, there's actually 91 units. Now, these units are quite useful and quite helpful if you are ever dealing with LLN challenged learners. You can actually come to these units and use them as electives as part of your course. Okay, so for example, you've got FSK OCM 02, engage in basic spoken exchanges at work. Okay, so if we click on that one, you would see that there's only 3 elements here, and it's very, very basic in nature. And you can certainly purchase resources to be able to deliver this unit. And we can just come back to this list here, and we go, all right, cool. What areas do I need to support my learners in? And we can pick out units to be able to do that. All right, so highly recommend that you get familiar with the FSK units. All right, and you will hear about FSK a lot more All right, you will hear about the FSK units a lot more as you get into the LLN field. Now, external sources, what you can also do is certainly hire a consultant. You can access the Workplace English Language Literacy and Well program, okay? Adult Migrant English program, Reading and Writing Hotline, Read Right Now program, ESL schools. All right, what I love to do is have a good list of my local ESL schools that I could recommend students go to, okay? Now, funding. A big thing about LLN support is that the more your RTO has access to funding and has a budget for LLN support, the better you'll be able to provide that support. We need to appreciate in realistic terms that funding, time, money is always a constraint, and we don't have a limitless time, we don't have limitless money. So we need to provide support within the context of what we have available. So always keep that in mind, all right? Now, we do have Centrelink here. It's a bit of a link to a job seeker program where they actually do provide free reading and writing classes, I think it is. And if you look up the Centrelink website, it regularly does updates on what classes they have available and who is eligible, okay? So now let's look at ways to work with an LLN specialist. All right, there's three possible approaches. We've got the LLN advisor model, LLN small group training model, LLN one-on-one support training model, and a mixed approach. Okay. Now, all of these are certainly viable and valid ways to work with a specialist, and you're going to find that one way suits your RTO and I guess your style of training better. Okay. So, by the way, the advisor model would simply be speaking to the LLN specialist about situations as they arise. All right, small group training model would be when the advisor would come in and specifically work with a small group of learners that all have the same identified issues. LLN one-on-one support training model is basically when the specialist works one-on-one with the learners. All right, mixed approach is obviously using a combination of the above. Now, LLN support strategies, real-world application. So as I said before, often when you're dealing with LLN challenged learners, it is in situations where you have a limited prior notice of those challenges. So what I want to do now is simply give you two basic ways that you could support a learner if you had limited notice of that and you have limited time to prepare. Okay, so learning. How could we help someone that's got learning challenges? Well, ultimately, somebody that's got learning challenges, they are someone that has a challenge thinking for themselves, okay? So we need to help them develop the ability to think for themselves, all right? So the best thing for them is we need to give them less answers and help them think themselves more. How do we do that? Well, teach less and coach them more. So for example, if a student comes up to you and says, how do I do X, Y, Z? You can say, that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked. What I highly recommend that you do is go and check out page 20 of the textbook and you'll find the answer there. Or if someone says, well, how do I do X, Y, Z? You could say, that's a great question. Go and check out this website. It's going to help you do exactly that. How do I do X, Y, Z? Well, you could say, go and talk to Mary over there. She's an expert at this and she'll be able to help you out. Okay. And we really want to encourage our learners to think for themselves, as I've said. Okay. Now, reading. We want to certainly simplify the words and use more pictures because as we know, a picture says 1,000 words. All right, so we are simplify the words and we want to use more pictures. All right, it's pretty self-explanatory. Writing, we want to use tracing and templates. We want to give students an opportunity to actually trace out what the report would look like. And then we want to give them a template and allow them to fill it in. Okay, because if you want someone to write up a medical report, well, it's probably a good idea to show them what a completed medical report would look like, get them to trace it, and then use a template and give them examples. Okay. Now, oral communication. We want to use a lot of full stops in how we speak, all right? So we want to put solid pauses in between ideas so that a student can follow along and they can listen and understand and have the time to process those ideas. Now, we also want to check in. We want to regularly check in. What does that look like? What does it sound like? Well, it simply means asking students, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Or we ask them a check-in question such as, just so that I know that you've heard me correctly, what did I just communicate? Or what were those steps that I just mentioned? Please tell me the steps that I just told you. If you want a student to write on a form, you could say, please write your name and address. So put your name here and put your address here. So just so I know that you've heard me correctly, where do you need to put your address? Okay, and literally check in with them by asking fact questions, and that'll tell you if they have retained the information or not. Okay, numeracy. Now, this one is about using real world context. All right, now I've got a picture of a pizza down here simply because if we were teaching fractions, well, it would make quite a lot of sense if we actually just talked about ordering a pizza. And we said maybe some students, oh, let's order a pizza together. Some students eat lots of pizzas. So maybe they're going to need like 5 or 6 pizzas. Other people, they only eat like 1 or 2 pieces. Other students eat, 6 or 7 pieces. And you just go through the process and help students understand fractions in a real world context. Okay. Now, let's take a look at some extra bonus tips for you. So extra tips for learning. Well, obviously, we can also help them develop a study schedule and time management plan with your students. We can provide information on note-taking and exam preparation, alternatives to hand note taking, such as audio and video recording. Relaxation and motivation techniques to help increase self-awareness can also be a great tool that we can use. Okay. Now, let's take a look at some extra tips for reading. So speed reading and document skimming techniques, we can teach those. Locating and highlighting the key words and phrases. Note-taking techniques to summarize reading materials, certainly a good thing to teach. Alternatives to note-taking, such as audio and video recording. And also presenting a learner guide, but also presenting the audio where somebody else is reading the learner guide can be a great support strategy as well. Extra tips for writing, note-taking techniques to improve legibility of handwriting. That's a good idea. Alternatives to writing documents such as audio and video, messaging. A trainer tip for whiteboards, avoid red and green. I simply say this because most people that are colorblind struggle with these two fundamental colors here, red and green. So if you're writing on whiteboard, try and avoid using red and green. Okay, it's not really an LLN specific idea, but just in general practicality, avoid red and green. Okay. Oral communication, listening activities via video, sound files, also subtitles on videos, all right? Because maybe some students can't hear the words properly, and maybe showing the subtitles can be a great way to support. Providing a vocabulary glossary, okay? Role play scripts, provide them, get students to read through them, get very familiar with the scripts, and that'll highlight key vocabulary. Role play drills, it's a great way to help students remember and retain information. Simulated activities, again, another great way to put people on the spot and get them thinking about different scenarios and how they could deal with them linguistically. Okay, numeracy, use as much juicy context as you can. So give them real world, real life reasons for doing and using the numbers and the calculations. Practice the formula numerous times. Okay, don't just rush through it. Don't change the variables till the student is ready. Okay, use pictures and images to represent concepts. Okay, so validated tools, precision consultancy. All right, so You might be wondering, how can you actually test the students' levels? Well, if you actually go to Precision Consultancy, it's a company that was charged with the task of developing some validated tools or LLN tools. Uh, and you can actually go to their website, and we'll do that right now. All right, so their website is precisionconsultancy.com.au. And if you come to this address, you will actually be able to see a list of validated tools that cover off different industries and will actually relate to different core skill levels as well. So if you wanted to, for example, test a student who may be around reading 2, writing 3, oral communication 3, you could use this task here. You can click on that and download the actual validated tool. And then you can get a sense of if they're actually at the levels for the course that you are running. Okay, and you can have a read through these in your own time, but really helpful. I really enjoy using the Precision Consultancy tools that we've got here. The only caveat that I will give you is that unfortunately, these tools don't actually have a marking guide with them. All right, so if you are going to use them, you will need to develop your own marking guide. Alrighty, now let's quickly look at customizing existing materials and how we need to maybe modify our learning materials so they are LLN friendly. All right, and as I've always said, the more simplified they are, the better. So customizing, key things to remember: keep it simple and don't deviate too far from the original program, because it can be tempting to simplify things way too much, and the core meaning is diluted too much. You need to write things from the reader's perspective, not your own. Less is more. So if you're providing a handout or something like that, really break it down into the crucial, urgent, priority information only. Trial run the activities to check appropriateness and timings and also comprehension. Seek feedback and further input from your colleagues. Okay. Ways to customize. Well, you can simplify the words for sure. Clarify the words. Use plain English and avoid jargon, slang, or technical words. And bullet points instead of long-winded sentences are always better. Add a glossary to any materials you're presenting. Use pictures and use steps. People love steps, and if you can provide a step-by-step process, that's really going to assist students. Okay. Now, examples of how simplification can be done for learning materials. So let's look at a PowerPoint slide. All right. Now, yes, this was actually a real PowerPoint slide that I found online. And if you actually type in poor PowerPoint slide, this one actually came up. So I'm not taking any blame for this. This one actually came up on a Google search. Now, as you can see, the slide is pretty poorly done. There's too much colorful words here. There's overly complex ways to describe things here. So I looked at this slide and I thought, how could it really be broken down into the core fundamental knowledge? I looked through all of these things and I thought, all right, from this line here, what is it really saying? What's it really saying? Are all of these words really necessary? And I broke it down into the following. Delegation temptation. Leaders are too tempted to delegate social media for the following 6 reasons. Extremely busy, limited familiarity, blah, 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 blah. All right, so hopefully you'd agree with me that this slide is a lot better than that one. Now, fire evacuation procedure, another example of very, very, very poor presentation on a PowerPoint slide here. Again, we can see that it's way too wordy, it's too complex, and if the sad thing is, if a student was actually trying to read it, they would probably get lost. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we've got 9 points here. What I did is I looked at how can we break it down so that an LLN challenged learner could be comfortable with it. So let's take a look. If alarms rings, stop work. Help others if it is safe. Stop machines and equipment. Help others leave the building. Use the stairs to leave the building. Go to the emergency meeting place. Stay there until firemen have told you it's okay to leave. I'm sure you would agree with me that that is much better than that, okay? So, The more we can critically evaluate our learning resources and materials and really simplify it, the better. Okay, so spot the ambiguity. I just want you to read through the question that we've got here, and hopefully you can pick up the major ambiguity that's going on and how a student could really be confused with one of these statements here. All right, so just read through statements 1 to 8, and I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, hopefully you have discovered the massive ambiguity there in number 1. You should not arrive more than half an hour before your allocated starting time. Now, does that mean like 30 minutes before? It could be meaning more than 30 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. It's just so confusing and very poorly written. And I show this one because it's very simple to easily miss ambiguities in information that we present. All right, so you would obviously want to change that one up to something like, you should arrive a minimum of 30 minutes beforehand, or you should arrive at least 30 minutes before your allocated start time, or something like that. Okay. Now, this image here is just a reminder to always get a spare set of eyes on your materials that you present. Okay. Now, also ways to customize and modify your delivery of training for LLN challenge learners is very important to think about. All right. So, adjustments to make within delivery. Consistently check in with people. Make sure that they're following along with you. Get exceptionally good at simplifying all your instructions. Avoid introducing technical terms too soon and learn to pre-teach. Get flexible with your word choice. Present instructions in written form, your voice, and check back with students on how they have interpreted the instructions. Last of all, we got modify and model everything first. What I mean by that is you really want to be able to demonstrate to students what a good job looks like. So if you're expecting them to perform in a role play, make sure that you model performance before you throw them into the role play, because otherwise they're just going to struggle. All right, show them what a good job looks like in a written form. If you're presenting a task for them to do, show them what a good job looks like. Model it, model it, model it. Please model it so that they know exactly what they need to do as they go into an activity. Okay. Now, further ideas. Remember, attention to information is always your aim. So avoid overwhelming students at all costs. You want to present 3 to 7 bits of information at any one time. Do not move on unless there has been time for review. And avoid using negatives in your instruction. Okay, and I'll give you some examples of that. So for example, you don't want to say things like, don't be late, don't read ahead, don't slam the door, don't forget your textbook, don't yell, don't touch that, don't read page 14. And this comes back to the fundamental principle that you can't think about what you don't want to think about without thinking about it. So if I actually say to you, don't slam the door, your brain is automatically going to focus on slamming the door, and there's a higher probability that you're going to unconsciously slam the door. Okay, and if I say don't read page 14, your amygdala, your brain is immediately going to be stimulated to think, oh, I'm going to read page 14 and see what happens. Okay, so as much as possible, you want to say things the way that you want them done. You want to say things the way that you want people to think about it. So instead of saying don't be late, we would say be on time. Instead of saying don't read ahead, we would say stay on the same page. Don't slam the door, we would say close the door quietly. Don't forget your textbook would be bring your textbook tomorrow. Don't yell would be let's talk quietly. Don't touch that, we would say touch this instead. Okay, don't read page 14. Instead, we would say, let's stay focused on whatever we're doing. Okay, so hopefully you can understand the danger of using too many negatives, and you can relate to that if you've got kids, or even if you've seen parents with kids saying, don't eat that, don't touch that, because immediately what does the kid want to do more of? Touch it or eat it. Okay, so say it the way that you want people to think about it. Okay, now be curious, never blame or prejudge your learners. Be observant and make notes on student behavior, all right, and avoid singling people out, all right. These are all really important in relation to training delivery skills. Be aware of people's strengths and play to them for sure, okay. Now, you always want to simplify your role plays. One simple thing that you can do is you can actually give easier role plays to one group and harder role plays to other groups, but you can write the instructions in a way that they wouldn't even understand that there is a difference, okay? So start to identify who are your stronger groups, who are your weak groups, and how can you set those up so that you can actually stretch performance and also make the performance more achievable for particular learners. Okay, so no man gets left behind is a philosophy that I always operate by when I'm training, and ultimately this is about a cool trick that you can use at the very beginning of your courses or your workshops or your training sessions, and basically you simply pair up students and get them to support each other through accountability, and you get students to become accountability buddies, and they simply check in with each other and see how are they going with their assessments, and it's a great way to provide more experienced learners with less experienced learners, and it makes both learners feel pretty good. But simply the idea of pairing up students at the beginning of class, as in check-in buddies or accountability buddies or assessment buddies, is a great way to create organic mentoring as well. All right, so just have a think about how could you create strategic pairing within your training sessions. It also is a great way to take a lot of pressure off you as well. Okay. Further ideas, do demonstrations more than lectures, show videos rather than PowerPoint presentations, or do both. Games and scenarios are a great way to facilitate brainstorming, and also an alternative to brainstorming if people feel uncomfortable. All right. Brainstorming in pairs is always a better idea before you brainstorm is in large groups. Okay, so quick review: fundamental support strategies to master learning. As I said, teach less, coach more. Reading, you want to simplify words and use pictures. Writing, you want to use tracing and templates. Oral communication, you want to use a lot of full stops and checking in with people. And numeracy, you want to use juicy context and real world examples. Okay, so cone of learning, something to think about, something to keep in mind as you are delivering your training. This is basically percentages of information that people take away from the different ways that we show information. So in terms of reading, it's been shown that people generally only receive and retain about 10% of information they're exposed to. Demonstration 30%, discussion 50%, practice doing 75%, and 90% when they actually teach others. This is really important in the context of LLN because we need to remind ourselves that the more we can present information in ways that are lower down the pyramid, the higher the probability that students are going to remember and get actively involved in what we're sharing and teaching. Okay, section 3, customizing assessment. Okay, so methods of assessment, there's a number of different ways that we can assess people, but we need to remind ourselves that if we are modifying assessment, we need to keep all reasonable adjustment justifiable, and ideally it is approved by someone. Okay, you don't want trainers and assessors just doing random reasonable adjustment on the assessment without really clearing it with someone. Okay. It must be never jeopardize the assessment conditions of competency, and you must never break what's acceptable within the workplace or industry. And it must maintain the integrity of the AQF level. Okay, multiple choice at diploma level is probably not appropriate. Certainly, true and false questions would not be appropriate at diploma level. Okay. So how can we modify? Well, we can adjust the instructions in the questions. We can simplify the instructions. We can change written tests to oral communication or orally give those instructions or ask those questions orally. visual project instead of written questions, stronger emphasis on role plays and practical demonstrations, allow extra time for writing, for sure, okay, typed answers instead of handwritten. Okay, now we need to avoid the two biggest symptoms of non-understanding, which is confusion and overwhelm. All right, this certainly can come up in assessments, and we want to avoid it as much as possible. How do we avoid confusion? How do we avoid overwhelm? Not hard. Confusion, how do we deal with it? Bring it back to the personal context and how the information relates to the student personally. So if somebody is confused, it's often because they can't link things in their mind and relate it back to themselves and how it relates, okay? So just think about, if you're presenting information, make sure that you always come up with examples that the person can relate to. So if you were teaching, for example, how to dance, well, it would probably make a lot of sense if you brought it back to examples about simply walking, okay? Or starting out with very simple songs and walking to the music, okay? Overwhelm is going back to point 0 and teaching each point one more time, but in a very strategic fashion. So you want to go back to point 0, teach point 1, get them to understand point 1, then do point 2. Then get point 3 understood, all right? And then you want to go back. So teach 1, 2, 3, review. Then 4, 5, 6, review 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Now, the fastest way to overwhelm someone, though, is to give them too much information too soon, okay? And with no reason to give them the information, okay? So confusion, bring it back to a personal relevance. Overwhelm, bring it back to point 1, stage 0, and build up again from there and keep reviewing each time, okay? So we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question, though: is our support working, all right? Because there's no point in keep doing something if it's not working. So we need to consistently evaluate our approach, okay? So who do we ask if the approaches are working or not? Well, obviously we can ask the learners, we can ask the LLN specialist, we can ask other trainers and assessors, we can ask the client, the employer of the students, okay? And we want to be judging for success, all right? And how would we know? Well, we could look at pre and post LLN testing results. Hopefully when they enroll in your course, they're doing a pre-LLN test, pre-enrollment test, and then we could look at the completion of a course if they do a post-LLN test and compare the results. We could look at their assessment results. Their attendance and participation is obviously going to tell us how our LLN support's going. If people are dropping off, then obviously it's a sign it's not working out. Competency completion rates, that's obviously another huge area that we can look at, okay? Records, what do we need to keep? Well, we need to keep records of learner enrollment and LLN assessments, changes made to the learning resources, records of changes made to how assessments were done, and reports from LLN specialists. Okay, so that essentially is the end of the learning module. So what's next? If you'd like to be part of the TAE graduate group on Facebook, definitely let us know and we will add you to that. And we also have the Advanced Trainer Bootcamp, which is available for trainers that want to take their skills to the next level. And the TAE isn't necessarily a prereq, but it will certainly help you when you come along to that course. But we are happy to have anyone and everyone attend that course who is really dedicated to taking their training delivery skills to the next level. Okay, so thank you so much for watching along with this webinar. Hopefully it's really clarified and helped you understand the LLN landscape a lot better, give you the skills and knowledge to be able to really customize your content delivery, give you some basic training delivery skills and tools and strategies that you can implement pretty much straight away to increase the probability that your learners are understanding all that you are teaching them. Okay, so thank you once again, and we would love to hear your feedback. Let us know how you found this module, and look out for the other modules as part of your TAE as well with Success Training Academy. Bye for now.